Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining. We wanted to run through the digital identity verification service that we've created for UK criminal record checks. Just as a quick introduction of who I am. I'm Jay Jernigan, so I'm Director of Product Management, and I lead the International Markets product team. So my team is responsible for any regional product improvements and solutions across EMEA, Latin America, and APAC. I'm your host for today. One other thing to note, if you're having trouble with any connection issues, you can either refresh your screen or hit F4, and that usually solves the problem. All right, so let's run through what we'll be talking about today. So I'll give a quick overview of HireRight and what we do. I can explain what digital identity verification is and why it's being introduced for DBS checks. I'll talk through the benefits of digital identity verification, both for customers and for candidates. We'll go through the existing ID verification process, as well as the new and improved process via our partner, Yoti. Then finally, we'll go through a quick demonstration of the process, some updates on what's coming next with digital identity verification, and then we'll have a quick Q&A followed by a quick survey. So please remember at the end of this webinar, please do remember to fill out the survey. It does give us some great information on what you want to see next and how I've done in this and what we can do to improve. So HireRight, what do we do? So we're obviously we're a leading global provider of technology-driven workforce risk management and compliance solutions. We deliver global solutions locally. We have complete and accurate reporting with rapid turnaround time. We have compliance-driven solutions in industry-guarded information security, as well as an efficient experience for our candidates and our customers. So we really do want to enable our customers to make better hiring decisions faster and easier. We have a full suite of products and solutions with a global reach, with quality and accuracy as a commitment. We do complement existing talent management, risk mitigation, and compliance strategies. And we do integrate with most APIs to connect directly into your platforms to make that process simpler and easier. So what is digital identity verification? It's a fully digital method of verifying candidates' identities. The candidate submits their required identity documents, captures a quick image of their face, and provides other relevant information via their smartphone or desktop. It's then verified using digital technology. This is different to the existing manual DBS ID verification process, where a candidate's documents are physically inspected and verified by a nominated representative from your organization. So why is digital identity verification being introduced for DBS checks? Well, it was a key deliverable of the Home Office and Disclosure and Barring Services UK Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework. This framework was created in response to the government's wider plan to make it quicker and easier for people to verify themselves using modern technology. So let's talk through the benefits of digital identity verification. So there's benefits both for customers and for candidates. It's a very simplified experience. So customers are no longer required to physically verify their candidate's identity in person with original documentation. Candidates are saving time and effort by no longer needing to send their identity documents to the post or to attend to verification in person. Additionally, there's a reduced risk of identity fraud. And this is a much faster process. It takes less than 5 minutes for a successful identity check to be completed from the moment the candidate starts populating their information in Applicant Center to the employer receiving results. So let's talk through the current process, and then we'll go through another slide showing the improvements. So previously, there were two options that a customer could use. So in one option, a customer would request the check, the DBS check. A candidate would then enter all their information into Applicant Center. And then a candidate would either have to post their documents to the customer or attend the customer office with original ID documentation. So that was an in-person check. So in the meantime, that check request for DBS was put on hold, pending that your receipt of ID documentation and a verification of that ID. Once that was done, HireRight would then request the check via DBS and then deliver the results when they were completed. Alternatively, a customer could request documentation up front. Again, the manual process of posting the documents or attending in person still applied. The customer would then verify the ID and then request the check. From then, after that ID verification was complete, then a candidate would then go through the process in Applicant Center to put in all their required information, and then we would then request the check via DBS and deliver the results. So you can see that in both processes, there was a bit of a manual step to make sure that we could either receive the documentation or manually verify that documentation in person. And that tended to put delays on the impending DBS check. So what you'll see with the new process is that the process is much faster and much more streamlined. In the new document digital ID verification process, you will request a check through Screening Manager, as you do today. And then the candidate will be able to provide all their information within Applicant Center. And this includes submitting imagery of their face using their PC or smartphone, as well as a copy image of their specified ID documents and other required information. So again, this process is delivered via our partner, Yoti. They're a fully certified identity service provider since the beginning of June. And this process then is much faster and takes less than 5 minutes to complete. So you can see the difference between the former manual process and this process is much faster, much more streamlined, both for candidates and for clients. So now we'll go through a demonstration of the process. This is one that I've completed earlier. We'll show you go through the whole process from start to finish, and you'll be able to see in person how much faster the new digital ID verification process is. So with that, I will play the video. Before your candidate starts the identity verification process, they complete their background screening submission in Applicant Center. Having provided information required for the basic disclosure check and any others you've ordered, they now, amongst other things, consent to the check being run and electronically sign the declaration before submitting. They're now ready to start the digital identity verification process. Firstly, your candidate is presented with an overview of the process they're about to follow. If your candidate declines, then you and your candidate must then follow the DBS's manual ID checking guidelines to verify your candidate's identity. You will be notified to initiate that process in your HireRight account in Screening Manager. Your candidate also has the option at this stage to postpone the digital identity verification process for 10 working days. This means they can leave it for now and come back later to complete the process, as long as they do within the 10 days. You can disable this function upon request if your organization would prefer not to give your candidates this option. In this scenario, your candidate accepts and submits. Next, we outline how your candidate's data will be used before they click Get Started. Then there's a list of what your candidate will need to do and have on hand to complete the process. Your candidate is then given the option to complete this on their smartphone or their desktop. We recommend their smartphone, as it's typically easier to take clearer pictures with the smartphone camera. If your candidate opts for their smartphone, they'll be asked to scan the QR code as shown, and they will then complete the same process as they would if they were using their desktop. In this scenario, your candidate opts to complete using their desktop. They'll then be asked to confirm whether they have a British driving license. The simplest way for your candidate to complete this process is by using their British driving license if they have one. This is because we can automatically capture your candidate's address from their driving license so they don't have to enter it manually. If they don't use their driving license and instead use an alternate ID document such as their passport, they will have to enter in their address information themselves. I'm going to show you the flow based on your candidate providing their passport, so you can see how your candidate provides their address. Remember, if they're using their driving license, they don't need to enter their address as it's captured from their driving license photo. So your candidate's asked if they have a British driving license, and in this scenario, they click Don't Own One to continue. After being shown a list of the documents they can use for the next part of your process, your candidate then clicks Get Started. They confirm they have a passport and click Add Photo. The application shows them the area of the passport that needs to be included in the photo. The candidate positions their camera over their passport and presses Take Photo when they're ready. They will then take the photo. They'll be prompted to check the photo is clear and readable. For the purposes of this demo, we've blurred the photos deliberately, but this won't be the case when your candidate completes this for real. If your candidate's satisfied, they select Yes, Upload. The photos are then uploaded. And now it's time for your candidate to provide their address after they click Continue. From the drop-down menu, they'll be asked to confirm the country for their main address, United Kingdom in this example, and again, click Continue. They enter their postcode, click Search, and select their address from the list provided, and then Continue. They're then asked to add the address as shown. This is completed and confirmed, and the candidate clicks Continue to progress to the final part of the process, the face scan, which is exactly the same process whether your candidate provides a driving license or another ID document before getting to this stage. After clicking Continue, your candidate will be asked to consent to the scan. Once that's done, there's some simple guidance on how to get the best scanning results before pressing Start Scan to begin the process. Using their camera, your candidate will then need to frame their face within the designated oval shape and click Ready once done. The candidate will be asked to remain still, move closer, remain still, until all of the scans have met their required standards and are uploaded. The candidate has now completed the process and presses Exit to finish and leave the session. The final screen confirms your candidates completed what they've been asked to do. They're now given the option to provide their mobile number for text updates and provide feedback. From here, your candidate's face scans will be compared to the submitted documentation to check for their likeness, and then verified to complete the identity verification process. The results of the identity check are then made available to you almost instantly in HireRight's Screening Manager. It takes less than 5 minutes for the digital ID verification process for a basic disclosure check to be completed. This is from the moment your candidate starts the process to the result of the identity verification being available to you in your HireRight account in Screening Manager. As soon as the identity verification is complete, HireRight submits the request to the disclosure barring service for them to progress and complete the basic disclosure check. Okay, so as you can see, the process is very simple, it's very streamlined, and it all happens within Applicant Center for basic disclosure. So what's next with digital identity? So from a HireRight perspective, the next thing that we'll be launching is a digital version of UK Right to Work. So this is, again, a part of the plan with the Home Office and DBS. This is something that will be coming in September. So this will allow users to, most users with a passport to utilize Yoti to verify their right to work within the UK. So this can be done separately or in conjunction with the DBS check. So for most users, they'll see the Yoti experience only once with that process. Additionally, later, probably towards the beginning of next year, we'll also be reimagining our global ID products, as well as our global right to work documentation product. So those are both things that we're working with Yoti to partner and deliver more value, and again, sort of a more streamlined process for candidates and for clients. Additionally, as other countries offer similar frameworks, we'll work with Yoti to incorporate those. So as other companies, or excuse me, as other countries evolve and include more digital identity frameworks, we'll be able to incorporate those and make sure that as those countries come along, we'll be able to use Yoti to have a similar process when that framework is available. So that's exciting, and then we look forward to working with Yoti to make those and bring those to market. So finally, it's the question and answer session. Again, you can type your questions within the chat. We do have a few questions that have already come into the chat, so thank you again. The first question was around storage. So how and how long are personal data and photos kept? So those are kept by Yoti as the data controller, but they will retain those within 30 days. So after 30 days, any documentation and any data scans will be deleted. One thing to note is that all that data is processed and housed within the UK. Okay, are there slides available? We have another question here about if the slides will be available to train your team. So we will have a recording of this webinar as part of signing up. So we'll be able to use those to train both within the commentary that I provided within the slides, as well as the video. We do have more information on the landing page as well. So there should be plenty of documentation to work with your teams. If you do have any other questions, please reach out to your account managers, and I'll be happy to help. Okay, so we did have one question that I completely sped through, so I apologize. So this will go live for general availability on August 8th. So this is coming up as an option very, very soon. So within the next few weeks for basic disclosure. Standard and enhanced disclosure will be coming later this year. All right. Let's see, what other questions? Steve, I do. My colleague Steve Greenfield is here as well. I just want to make sure. Were you able to join in as well?
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Great. Okay. So one of the other questions that we had was they're coming fast and furious. So within what notifications will a candidate receive if the DBS check is declined, or if there's an issue with the documentation? So there is an error process available, but I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that.
So yeah, if the candidate submits the digital ID check and they do not pass, then customers will be notified straight away. They'll receive a notification via email, and within the screening manager inform you that the candidate was unable to pass a digital ID check. And then what it will do is it will fall back to the existing manual process. So it will ask you to complete the DBS ID check manually. So it doesn't mean that the application will be cancelled or anything like that. It will just revert back to the old manual process.
Okay, great. Okay, so there's a bit of a longer question here. Hi there. The question is, hi there. As I understand it, any candidates who live outside of the UK will not go through digital DBS and will continue to go through the manual check. However, will the Yoti HireRight system note that this is the case so they don't complete the manual check? Steve, so I believe this is talking about Disclosure Scotland. So this is only the DBS check is only available for checks within England, Wales. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, those are still manual processes.
Yeah, so there's one specific scenario where there may be some difficulty. So if a company is employing a candidate who currently lives outside of the UK, but they are applying to work in England, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, or Isle of Man, which is each of the regions covered by the DBS, it won't be possible for the candidate to pass a digital ID check, because the part of that verification process is the candidate's current address has to be validated. That can only currently be done with a UK address. So those applicants will not successfully be able to get through the process. They will start up digital identity, but they'll be told straight away that they won't be able to go through the digital ID process, and it will just fall back to the manual process. We imagine that scenario being fairly rare, where someone is living outside of the UK but applying to work in the UK. But for other scenarios where the job location isn't England, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, so if it's outside of the UK, for example, it's still Disclosure Scotland who will be processing that check. Digital ID only applies to DBS checks. So there wouldn't be any impact to Disclosure Scotland. HireRight still does the ID check for Disclosure Scotland, and the other vendor also, Access and I.
Great. Another question that came up is how long can this update be delayed for my organization if they're not ready to adopt the change? So when we...
I don't think there's any specific time period on that. I think you would just let your customer service representative or account manager know, and once you're ready, you'll just confirm back to them, and then they can switch it on for you. So I don't think there's any restriction on time frames. Just let us know when you're ready, effectively.
All right. And in terms of the disclosure certificate, will that still be posted to the candidate, or will the candidate receive a digital copy?
There's no changes to that process, so the candidate still has control over whether they receive electronic certificate only, or if they receive paper and electronic certificates. That's an option that exists within the HireRight application form. So there's no change to that. It will still work exactly the same way it does today.
Okay, great. All right, so then there's another question here around record checks for other countries. So as a client, you have to confirm they have verified 2 forms of documentation. So would HireRight be able to use this service use Yoti as a service too? So as I mentioned earlier, as other countries adopt similar frameworks, we'll work with our partner Yoti to incorporate those when they become available. So it will happen in the future on a country-by-country basis as they become available. So right now, we're only supporting this process for criminal checks for the UK. But again, we do look to expand these as they happen. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing anything because they are all coming in quickly. All right. So if a candidate screening is not okay, is the customer only informed about the results, or will they have access to details about why the criminal check will not pass?
So the customer will have access to the Yoti validation report, which shows all the documents that the candidate uploaded during the digital ID check and whether those elements passed and met the DBS's requirements in terms of the level of ID verification needed. If they don't pass, then that will be stated on that document, and you'll find that in the Screening Manager under the sub-request in the Documents tab, so that's available for your review.
Okay. Let's see. One other question. So for DBS checks, there's a list of acceptable documents, for example, a birth certificate or a bank statement. Will that list be of documents be provided to candidate within the portal? Yes. If you look at the demonstration again, or if as you go through the flow, you can see that we do list the documents that an applicant will have to have on hand to complete the check. So we do have those listed out as part of the instructions before they enter the Yoti process. All right. Will this check be valid for passports and driver's licenses that are expired if they don't have a current driving license or a passport? So Steve,
I don't believe they are. No, I don't think Yoti will accept expired passports. I think they have to be valid and current.
Okay. All right. will HireRight be taking identity verification checks for new hires, and is HireRight IDSP certified now? So again, we are partnering with Yoti, who are IDSP certified. And again, as a client, as you are ready to move to this process, then we can switch you to the Yoti process for new hires. Let's see. Okay. So again, somebody asked if we'll be using this for other additional checks. So for say adverse financial or sanctions. So right now, this is only for UK criminal checks. But we again, as we continue to work with Yoti and expand our partnership, we'll be able to use at least the identity verification part in more processes, in more products. So again, we're working through that because, again, it's something that will be a bit of a global change. And so we're hoping to introduce that early next year. So look forward to that in the future. So, the other questions here, I think they're, so it says HireRight currently performs checks on expired IDs and passports, but how will that be affected within the Yoti system? So if they don't have documentation to provide, what are the alternatives, Steve?
So there is quite a long list of documents that Yoti is able to accept for the digital ID check. So they'll be displayed to the candidate, and if they don't hold the primary documents such as passport, driving license, national ID, etc., they'll be given a list of alternative documents, but they need to meet the medium level of ID verification as required by the Home Office. So it may be that additional documentation may be needed to meet that requirement. If the candidate doesn't have any documents that will enable them to get through the digital ID check process, then they wouldn't pass, and we'd fall back to the manual DBS ID check process. And that obviously would just follow the existing DBS ID checking guidelines that exist today. And just a reminder that candidate's identity does have to be validated, whether it be under the digital or manual DBS ID checking guidelines, before you can process any level of DBS check.
All right. A few more questions here. Can candidates postpone their DBS checks for up to 10 days? So yes, so that's something that we do offer as an option. Alternatively, if your organization does not want to offer that postponement option, we can turn that off into in-account settings. There's a question from Marco. Is the personal data encrypted? Yes, it is encrypted. Again, Yoti, as our partner, has all the security that we need to make sure that we're processing data correctly and in the UK. All right. Will the right to work check? Okay, so we do have some questions around right to work. So again, so we're planning to launch right to work, UK right to work, and combined UK right to work with basic disclosure by the end of September, to make sure that we can meet the legislative deadlines of September 30th. So that is in progress. So we'll have an understanding. Once we have a clear idea of release date, we'll make sure that we let people know. And that is something that that is, again, the development is in progress as we speak. Will the digital Yoti service support standard and enhanced disclosure? So in the future, yes, it will. There are processes both for basic, for standard, and for enhanced disclosure. We did want to roll out with basic first, because that does affect a larger population of our customers and our candidates, but we will be offering standard and enhanced later this year. Trying to see, is Yodi UK based? Yes, it is. So Yodi is based here in London. So we've worked very closely with them in person to make sure that we can make this as seamless as possible for you and for your candidates. How long does it take for Yodi to complete the check and send the report? So what we've seen in most cases is that in some of the pilots that we've run, we've seen most checks done again within 5 minutes. Certainly same day if there are any questions around clarity and things like that. So we are seeing a very quick turnaround with this process. All right. Will this new process be offered as standard, or will there be an additional cost? So this is something that you can opt into as part of your current process, or still opt out using manual checks. But there is no additional cost to this service. Trying to see if we've covered everything. And again, I think we did cover this earlier, but Steve, I don't know if you want to provide a bit more information. So does this check only apply to UK candidates applying for work in the UK and not candidates from overseas coming to work into the UK?
Yes, I think I did cover this a few moments ago. So, yeah, the digital ID check is for when the DBS is the processing agency that are going to be running the UK criminal record search. And the DBS cover England, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, and Isle of Man. So if the applicant is living outside of the UK at the time of application, but they're applying for a job within England, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, they won't be able to pass a digital ID check because you must have a current UK address to be able to pass the address verification section. So that would fall back to the manual DBS ID checking process that you're already familiar with today. So it would just be regarding reviewing candidates' original documents with them. So that's the way you would get them through that process. If the candidate is living outside of the UK and applying for a job outside of the UK or potentially in Scotland or Northern Ireland, the digital ID process would not apply. It is not currently working for Disclosure Scotland and Access NI. They have different ID checking requirements, a different framework that hasn't been set up to work with digital ID just yet. It may happen in the future that they'll set up their own framework for digital ID, in which case obviously we'd very much like to introduce that as well. But for the time being, those existing processes for Disclosure Scotland Access and I apply, whereby HireRight is able to conduct the ID check using copies of documentation. So, so effectively, the only time there may be an issue where digital ID can't be used is when the candidate resides outside of the UK, as in applying for a job in England, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, or Isle of Man. So the fallback would be used to go under the old manual process.
And again, I think one of the questions that just came up, if we could waive the DBS check for those living outside of the UK. And yes, we can sort of, we'll fall back to a manual process as part of that. Again, and then there was a question around cost. Again, this is included as part of a feature as part of basic disclosure. So there's no additional cost there. There was a question around accessing the landing page. When later this week, we'll send out a link not only to this webinar, but also a link to the landing page that includes FAQs, and other relevant information. So again, there will be FAQs there for you to reference if there are questions that that you maybe haven't asked, or if some of the more common questions that we're seeing. So those will be available when we send out the link to this webinar. And is there any limit to adding numbers of candidates in the same day? No, there's no limits as far as the volume of what DVS checks can do with this process. Okay. And it looks like we are sort of running down to the final few questions. So how do you perform address checks since the candidate can fill out forms manually instead of sending the document with an address? So with the OD process, if they're using a document that doesn't have an address, like a passport, they have as part of the process, they'll be prompted to add additional documentation, like a bank statement and or other documentation that have an address on it to verify that.
Address verification is done via a credit bureau. So if the candidate provides their UK driving license or British driving license, that contains the candidate's current UK address. By law, it has to be kept up to date. So we extract the address information from that document, so the candidate doesn't need to enter it manually, and that address is validated via a credit bureau. So the candidate has to be found linked to the address via their credit record effectively. If the candidate doesn't have a British driving license, then they'll be asked to manually enter their address information. So I think we saw that in the demo a few moments ago. They enter their postcode, they click search, presented with a list of addresses under that postcode. They select their relevant one, and then they just click to add it. And then that address is then searched via the credit bureau. And if a link to the candidate can be found, current link can be found to that address, then they will pass the address verification element of that check.
Okay, so I think that's probably the majority of the questions that we have at the moment. So again, after we end this webinar, there will be a survey at the end. It takes just a few minutes to complete, less than 5 minutes, almost as quick as a DVS check. So please, again, if you don't mind filling out that survey and providing any feedback to make sure that we can get a better understanding of how we did, what we can improve, and if there's anything in the future that you'd like to see. So thank you again, everyone, for your time this morning. And again, we'll be pushing ahead with the link, with the recording of this, as well as additional FAQs and other documentation later this week. So thank you again, everyone, for your time, and have a great day.